Hey everybody, this is Nick Baldwin from theScore, doing things a little different today on this football Sunday. I figured there's not a lot going on, at least for me. I'm not a big football guy, so I figured why not hop on here, talk some fights. A lot going on in the world of mixed martial arts. We just had UFC Paris yesterday, Accra Arena, the UFC's third trip to the French capital in the past 3 years, kind of becoming an annual stop for them, understandably so. Paris, I wasn't there yesterday, of course. I'm home in Winnipeg, Canada, but what an atmosphere. You could feel it just through the TV. I was lucky enough to go to a Bellator card in Paris last year, and even for a slightly lower level event, the atmosphere was just off the charts. Those Paris fans are incredible. In my opinion, it's Dublin, Paris, and everybody else in terms of MMA and frankly boxing crowds as well. I was able to go to a boxing event in Dublin last year as well, and it was great as well. We have UFC 307 coming up on Saturday in Salt Lake City. That's a big pay-per-view card, the first of two in October. Of course, that's Alex Pereira, the most active champion in the UFC right now, taking on Khalil Rountree. One of two title fights, Raquel Pennington, Juliana Pena in the co-main event for the women's bantamweight title. Hope you all are doing well. Let me know if you enjoy this. Maybe I'll do this a little more often, somewhat regularly. Maybe not. Maybe this is the last time you'll see me. Who knows? But I figured, you know what? It's a quiet Sunday. Why not hop on here and talk some fights and kind of do a little throwback? Because if you followed me for a long time, you'll remember I used to do this every week. I had podcasts, the MMA Circus before the battle. You'll remember me and Andrew, the Clown Kid Lawrence. Jed Meshew was in the mix a lot as well, Wesley Riddle. So if you're a subscriber from back in those days, I appreciate you still being here and tuning in. And give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Feel free to comment below with any thoughts or feedback or suggestions or what have you. Or if you just want to troll me, feel free to do that as well. Like this video, subscribe, and do all that good stuff. I really do appreciate it. So as I said, UFC Paris in the books about 24 hours ago. It was nice to wake up and basically just turn on the TV and start watching some fights. Always enjoy punch brunch, as I like to say, especially because 2 weeks ago, the UFC Sphere card just went so late. Even here in the middle of North America, Central Time Zone, it was like 1 in the morning, 1:30 before it wrapped up. It's just crazy. And so it was nice to have a morning little matinee UFC fight night event. And overall, it was a decent showing. Of course, Renato Moicano, Benoit Saint Denis in the main event. Didn't go well for the French fans in that one, but lots of good performances across the board from the French men and women overall. So let's kind of run down what happened. We'll start in the main event. Renato Moicano defeats Benoit Saint Denis. Second round, doctor stoppage. Man, what a performance from Renato Moicano. He came in as the underdog. I think a lot of people kind of looked at this as a clash of styles in the sense that Benoit Saint Denis, if he was going to win, it would be rounds 1, 2, maybe 3. It would be probably a vicious knockout because that's what he does. I mean, even if you saw him against Dustin Poirier, one of his rare UFC defeats, what a back and forth war. Actually, one of my fights of the year so far. And this guy's a killer. So I think if you were backing Saint Denis in this one, it was probably by knockout. If you were backing Moicano, it was probably kind of along the lines of what we saw. Maybe not as dominant, but it would be with that grappling. Renato Moicano is just so dangerous on the ground. And what a brilliant performance. That first round was genuinely one of the most perfect rounds I've seen in a very long time. He took Saint Denis down about 30 seconds into the round, if I recall. Never let him up. Just absurd ground and pound. Just elbows from hell, punches and control from the back. Never really came too close to a rear naked choke, which is kind of Moicano's move. But so Saint Denis, I guess you could say defended well, but man, I mean, what a start it was for Moicano. I think that surprised everybody. It was a 10-8 round across the board. All three judges had a 10-8. I think there was even an argument to be made that it was a 10-7 round. That's how dominant and one-sided it was. Moicano just looked great. And Saint Denis was so busted up that it was one of those things like people were watching, myself included, and it was hard to say if Saint Denis had any chance of recovering. Even in the second round, he won it, which is a testament to his toughness and his heart and his will. Don't get me wrong, but he just kind of looked like a shell of himself at that point. It looked like he was not really fully recovered. Both of his eyes were swollen. The right one was basically swollen. Well, it was swollen shut, and that's why the doctor inevitably stopped it after 10 minutes of action. But I mean, kudos to both guys. Moicano put on a hell of a performance, and Saint Denis, it wasn't a great showing by him, but at least he showed off that toughness that we have come to expect from him. And I have no doubt that Saint Denis will bounce back. I mean, I guess we can talk about him first, and then there's lots to say about Moicano. But starting with Saint Denis, I mean, not the best night at the office for him, no doubt. Not the finish to UFC Paris that the 15,000 Parisians wanted to have last night or yesterday afternoon. But you know what? I think what he showed is that he's still, with a bit of work, he's still going to be a player in this division for a long time. He's still pretty young, I think 28 years old. And in this lightweight division, yes, it's stacked, but I just think with what we've seen from him, the knockout of Matt Frivola last year, the near win against Dustin Poirier before Poirier came back and won himself back in March, and even against Moicano, again, it was kind of lopsided, but I just think everything we see from Saint Denis, that heart, that ability to knock people out, just that ferociousness on the feet, that aggression, it's going to do him well in this division. I think he needs to work on a few things. I think Moicano got him down, first of all, way too easy. And Saint Denis needs to work on his get-up game, needs to work on that overall takedown defense. Just a little, a few fight IQ things, but you tighten that up. And when he gets to a point where he can keep things on the feet against just about anybody, this guy's going to be a tough guy to beat. Of course, right now, the top of the lightweight division is as good as it gets, is Makhachev, Arman Tsarukyan. These are no easy matchups by any means, but I also think Saint Denis is going to be around maybe when Makhachev isn't, maybe when Tsarukyan isn't. And so it'll be interesting to see where Saint Denis goes from here. I think for now he's hit a bit of a ceiling. He can drub the Matt Frivolas of 155 pounds, but clearly Renato Moicano was too much for him. Dustin Poirier was too much for him. So I think, Saint Denis now needs to go back to the drawing board a little bit. I think the matchmakers need to give him a bit of an easier opponent next time. These have been some tough matchups for him. But if he gets back and sort of finds his groove again, I have no doubt that we'll be talking about Saint Denis for a very long time. And I think when Cyril Gane is retired, whenever that may happen, I think Benoit Saint Denis can be maybe the face of French MMA to some regard. But again, I mean, I don't want to be too positive because this was a setback for sure. This was a chance to maybe crack into the top 10 and really shine against a veteran opponent. And he did fall flat. But on the flip side, holy moly, Renato Moicano, he wants money and he's going to get it after this one. I think, as I said, that first round was as good of a round as I've seen in a very long time. He just came out and just big brother Benoit Saint Denis. And regardless of who you picked and regardless of the betting odds, I just don't think anybody expected that at all. I think people thought this was a competitive fight on paper. People thought that, Saint Denis has a bit more upside. We've kind of seen Moicano already reach that ceiling. But now I think this win is making people second guess how we view Renato Moicano. I mean, at featherweight, you'll remember back 5 or 6 years ago when he was trying to think. I mean, around the time when he lost to Korean Zombie, but just before that, he was on a tear. He was top 5 at featherweight. He ultimately moved up a few years later just because the weight cut was getting too rough for him. And he was having mixed success at lightweight. The loss to Rafael dos Anjos, a few wins against, subpar competition. But now he's won 6 in a row. And he hasn't looked better than this ever, to be honest. Up a weight class, he is beating top 10, top 15 competition. And based on how he looked against Benoit Saint Denis, I think there's a case to be made that he can beat a lot more people in this division. I mean, if we look at the top 5, top 10, are you telling me Renato Moicano can't beat Dan Hooker, who's number 5 in the division? A 38-year-old Michael Chandler, Beneil Dariush, who's coming off back-to-back stoppage losses. Gamrot would be an interesting one. Fiziev is interesting. And then you get the Moicano. So, I mean, I think this win over St. Denis proved that Moicano has the ability to be a top 5 contender at 155. I'm not saying he's going to get there. It's going to depend on certain matchups and where he goes from here. But he has that ability. He is freakishly good. And I think the biggest thing we have to talk about for Renato Moicano is this guy is smart. He nearly lost to Jalen Turner at UFC 300 in April, but he didn't. And then he survived, he recovered, and he took Turner down. And what did he do? He beat him. I believe it was a ground and pound TKO? I believe so. Not a submission. Yeah. I think it was a ground and pound TKO. Regardless, though, he finished him. He got the win. He survived, and he used his bread and butter, grappling, to set up the win, and he got it. Just like at UFC Paris. He wasn't going to hang with St. Denis on the feet. St. Denis is the better puncher, the bigger knockout artist. So he took him down. 30 seconds in, took him down, absolutely smothered him on the ground, battered him on the ground, to the point where St. Denis just wasn't the same fighter. He absolutely destroyed him, and that's how Moicano was going to win this fight. It was on the ground. He knew that, and he used the perfect game plan and made it look easy, frankly. And so I think Moicano has what it takes to be a real contender in this division. And I mean, he's not super young. What is he? He's 35. So yeah, he's definitely towards the end. But I think just with how his career has gone, I kind of get the sense that this is kind of his prime. Like, this is as good as he's been, and he's kind of getting better. So I could see a future where in a couple of years, Dustin Poirier's retired, maybe Gaethje's retired by then. Islam's not going to fight forever. Dan Hooker's not going to fight forever. Michael Chandler's 38. Moicano, I'm not going to say he's going to be, fighting for titles and that sort of thing, but he could be around when some of these other guys aren't. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see where Renato Moicano goes from here. The fight I want to see, I think the fight a lot of people want to see, is Paddy Pimblett. And that might not make a ton of sense for Moicano in terms of getting to the title or getting into the top 5, because right now Moicano is number 11, St. Denis is number 12, and Pimblett's number 15. Having said that, Paddy Pimblett has shown he's really proved himself over the past 6 months as a legit lightweight contender, a ranked lightweight. When a lot of people thought that he was all talk and not a whole lot more than that. But Paddy Pimblett has shown that he is one of the 15 to 20 best lightweights in the UFC in the world. And of course, this is a huge fight. I mean, Moicano and Pimblett have been talking, going back and forth in interviews, in the media, on social media for a long time now. And I think whether this happens in December or in January, or maybe the main event of a fight night card, this is a big fight. And you know what? Sometimes that matters more than fighting the number 8 guy. Does beating Dariush do a whole lot more for Moicano's star power and overall ranking in the division than a win over Pimblett does? I'm not so sure. Yeah, it might move him up a few more spots, but I think there's a lot to gain from Moicano. I think there's absolutely a lot to gain for Pimblett. And you know what? They both want it. And I think that's as obvious of a matchup as you can get. Moicano also mentioned possibly fighting Dan Hooker. I love that fight too. I mean, you can book, here's the thing with the lightweight division, you can book anybody against almost anybody in the top 15, and it's probably going to be a fun fight. So I don't think the UFC matchmakers can go very wrong here, but for my money, Moicano Pimblett is the fight to make. Let's move along to the co-main event. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on this one, but do want to highlight Nasruddin Imavov's win over Brendan Allen, unanimous decision. Pretty bizarre fight, kind of entertaining at times, but kind of sluggish, I guess, a little bit. Brendan Allen didn't look great. His 7-fight winning streak comes to an end. Imavov, of course, called for a title shot after. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's still probably third in line behind kind of 1A, 1B, Sean Strickland, and the winner of Whitaker and Chimaev, which happens on October 26th. But hey, I mean, it was a good win by Imavov, not overly impressive, but he did what he had to do. A lot of good ground and pound in that one, kind of outstruck him on the feet as well. Just a disappointing performance. I think that's the story of this fight. Disappointing from Brendan Allen. This is a guy who has been talking smack, with about Dricus du Plessis, the champion in the division. He's been kind of pushing for that next step. He got it and just fell flat completely. He said himself, he wrote on Twitter that he just fought like shit. And you know what? He's not entirely wrong, but I'm sure he'll bounce back. He's a good fighter, but not the best night at the office for Ben Allen. But hey, Imavov has won, I believe, 3 in a row now, 4-fight unbeaten streak, and he's good. I mean, not the most popular fighter, not someone who's making headlines left and right, but pretty sneakily good. And he can beat a lot of guys. I mean, Jared Cannonier was a good win. I'd like to see him probably. I mean, the Strickland rematch would be interesting. It'll probably depend on who DDP gets next. If they do du Plessis and Strickland too, then maybe you do Imavov against the winner of Whitaker and Hamzat. If the winner of that gets DDP, maybe you do the Strickland fight. It's hard to say. Comes down to a few things, few variables. Depends what Izzy Adesanya wants to do. Kyle Bohayo is, of course, in the picture as well. And I believe Imavov and Chimaev have trained together and are kind of friends. Imavov said after this fight that he wouldn't fight Hamzat, so who knows what will happen next, but Imavov definitely in the picture, but I don't think he'll be getting that title shot next. What else do we have on this card? Joanderson Brito. That was a lot of weird judging on this card, I will say. Joanderson Brito suffered a split decision loss to William Gomez. I wasn't really scoring the fight. It kind of felt like 2-1 either way was not a bad score. A lot of people online disagreed with Gomez getting the win. There was a couple split decisions on this one that just kind of probably shouldn't have been split decisions. Oh, here we go. Fares Ziam knocking out Matt Frevola. If you have not seen this, go check it out. What a knockout. Honestly, probably my number 2 or number 3 knockout of the year so far. I think Max over Gaethje at UFC 300 is probably locked in at that top spot, but good Lord, Fares Ziam had never looked better up, even before the knockout. He was putting on a clinic against Matt Frevola, who is a pretty respected veteran in the lightweight division. Ziam just outclassing him on the feet, just looked a lot better. Younger guy, and I think he can make some waves in the division. Make some waves in the division. But man, oh man, what a knockout that was! We have it up on theScore if you want to go check that out. But just a perfectly timed knee in the clinch, as devastating of a knockout as you'll probably ever see, and pretty creative too. You don't see this kind of knockout very often. Kind of reminds me of Jose Aldo knocking out Chad Mendes back in 2012 in Brazil. That was their first fight, the first round. At the end of the round, the knee in the clinch. Aldo, of course, storms out into the crowd after iconic moment. Kind of reminiscent of that finish, just in terms of the knee itself. But what a knockout. And Matt Frevola just kind of that ultimate, go out on your shield kind of fighter. Must see TV regardless. So yeah, what a fight that was. Brian Battle, I think, was another standout performer on this card. He defeated Kevin Josette via second round TKO. He looked great. He looks like a welterweight American version of Charles Oliveira. The blonde hair and kind of similar stance as well. And honestly, yeah, it's dangerous. Brian Battle, winner of Ultimate Fighter 29 back a couple of years ago, had a little hype behind him. Not too much though, but I think that's going to change. I think Brian Battle, 30 years old now, he's really hitting his stride. 4-fight unbeaten streak now, had a no contest in there, hence the unbeaten. But yeah, he looked great last night or yesterday, and I don't know where he goes. I think it'll still be a win or two away from that top 15, but he's dangerous and he's freaking good on the feet, and I think he'll probably just keep winning. So that's pretty much it for UFC Paris. As I said, pretty solid main card at the end of things. Prelim card, little rough. 7 fights, 5 were decisions, 2 submissions, no knockouts. Not the best fights, but the main card really heated up. The first couple were vicious knockouts, and then, of course, the main event between Moicano and Saint Denis was a kind of anticlimactic, but you know what? I mean, that doctor stoppage was, you had to do it. Saint Denis' his right eye was completely shut, or just about. He couldn't see. The ref was, or the doctor, excuse me, was doing the test 2, 3, and so on, and Saint Denis couldn't see. And his left eye was pretty banged up as well. I mean, just the damage he endured in 5 minutes. Yeah, as I said earlier, like, holy crap, Renato Moicano just absolutely put him through the wood chipper. But so yeah, that's UFC Paris. Let's move along to what's coming up, and that is UFC 307. Goes down this Saturday, October 5th, in Salt Lake City, Utah, and we got quite the pay-per-view lineup. Alex Pereira, Khalil Rountree Jr. in the main event. Raquel Pennington versus Juliana Pena, co-main event. Jose Aldo, excuse me. I don't know why I said Jose. I never do that. Jose Aldo versus Mario Bautista. Kayla Harrison, second UFC fight against Caitlin Vieira. And Roman Dolidze returning to middleweight against Kevin Holland. Under the card is pretty solid as well. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is back against Joaquin Buckley. You have Carla Esparza, her retirement fight against Tisha Pennington, formerly known as Tisha Torres. OSP and Ryan Spann. Tim Means is on the card. Yeah, a lot to like on this card. We'll start with the main event, and this is an interesting one. A lot of people, if not everybody, kind of thought Magomed Ankalaev would be next in line. He deserved it. He's been on this tear for a number of years now. He hasn't lost since his debut in 2018. He's the number 2 ranked contender, I believe, in the division. He seemed like the shoo-in contender, title challenger for Pereira. But nope. We go down to number 8 in the division, Khalil Rountree Jr. I think ultimately the UFC wanted this fight because on paper, it is an easier fight for Alex Poatan Pereira, who, let's be honest right now, the UFC isn't overflowing with star power. John Jones is, yes, he's fighting in November, but that might be it for John Jones. Conor McGregor, we don't know. He may never be back. Alex Pereira is kind of the guy right now. He is the most active champion. He is very popular among fans, and he's a damn good fighter. He is one of the pound-for-pound best in the UFC right now. And I think the way the UFC looked at this matchup is, yes, it's going to be a KO on either side, but it's a lot easier of a matchup for Pereira than Ankalaev would be. Ankalaev could give Pereira fits on the ground, nightmare matchup on paper, if you will. Could be a nightmare matchup for Ankalaev too, if Pereira can keep it standing, but we've seen Pereira get taken down before. With Khalil Rountree Jr., I don't think you're going to see that. I think this is going to be a stand-up fight, and I think this matchup compared to the Ankalaev matchup gives the UFC and gives Pereira the highest chance of winning, and particularly gives the UFC the highest chance at yet another highlight reel knockout that they can put all over YouTube and social media and continue to grow Pereira's star power and try and really turn him into a mainstream star. So I think that's why the UFC booked this fight. I don't think, as Dana White said a while back, them booking Ankalaev against Rakic had anything to do with why he wasn't available. I think they just didn't want to give Ankalaev a title shot, which is fair enough. They can do what they want. It'll be interesting to see what, Rountree is absolutely a live underdog. Pereira is the rightful favorite. He should win. But to break things down in a simple manner, I think this is going to ultimately come down to who lands first, Alex Pereira or Khalil Rountree Jr. Both guys hit like trucks. Both guys have one punch knockout power, one kick knockout power. Both guys use all of their limbs and weapons very efficiently, and both guys can knock each other out. And so, yes, I favor Alex Pereira, but don't count Rountree out. He could spoil the party. He could spoil the Poetan party on Saturday. So it'll be interesting. I think, as I said, Pereira, like I'll lean Pereira, but I'm going to be watching this very intently, edge of your seat kind of fight, because we've seen Pereira get knocked out before. Israel Adesanya, April 2023. That wasn't that long ago. Yes, it was at middleweight, but you know what? If you land flush, anybody can be knocked out. And so I think in some respects, this is a 50-50 fight because of the KO threat on either side. And so I'm really intrigued. I think we're going to get a big highlight one way or the other. I think if you're a Pereira fan, you should be worried. I think if you're a Rountree fan, you should be worried. And I think, maybe this wasn't the fight that we all wanted to see, or maybe the fight that needed to happen right now. I mean, Rountree, yes, he's done well, but his biggest win in the past ever is Anthony Smith, and that was only a year ago or so. And that's just not a huge win in 2023, 2024. So not necessarily the fight that was supposed to happen or people were dying to see, but I don't think we're going to get a boring end to UFC 307 on Saturday in Salt Lake City. Co-main event, I'm not going to really talk a whole lot about it. It'll be interesting to see if Juliana Pena can get back to the throne and what that could mean for Amanda Nunes potentially coming back. There's been really no indication that Nunes plans to come back. She happily retired back at UFC 289 in Vancouver, June 2023. Obviously, the greatest women's fighter in history, has a family now, focused on other things, but her and Juliana Pena are 1-1. And if Pena gets the belt back, maybe, depending on, what she says on the mic after, what she does on social media, how she performs in general, maybe there's a way that she gets Nunes back. So I think that's an interesting storyline heading to this one. Of course, Bennington is the champion. She can win this fight. I'd probably lean Pena ever so slightly, but this is a close fight. I'm not necessarily expecting it to be the most fun. But ultimately, I think where we really go with this one is two fights before Kayla Harrison. Kayla Harrison, the former two-time PFL champion who debuted very impressively against Holly Holm at UFC 300 in April. She makes her second UFC appearance on the main card against Caitlin Vieira. Number 2 versus number 3 in the division. Winner almost undoubtedly will get the next title shot. And assuming that's Harrison, who's a big favorite against Vieira, and I think probably will run through Vieira just like she did against Holly Holm a few months ago, I think that'll be a tough fight for either Pennington or Pena, assuming Amanda Nunes doesn't come back. As cool and as fun as that would be, I'm not really banking on that. I think the story here is that Kayla Harrison is the next in line and the heir to the throne. Kayla Harrison would probably be a 3-1, 4-1 favorite against either Pennington or Pena. And it honestly kind of shocks me that they didn't just go for the Pennington-Harrison fight right away. Kayla Harrison, I think, is the UFC's best chance at reviving this women's bantamweight division, which even when Nunes was still around for the last couple of years, has just not been a very fun division. There's not a lot of up-and-coming talent. A lot of the fighters who made the division, the best women's division for a long time, Miesha Tate, Holly Holm, Ronda Rousey, Nunes, Kat Zingano, Sarah McMahon, Sarah Kaufman, Alexis Davis, the list goes on. are obviously almost all no longer in the UFC or fighting professionally at all. And it's just not the most entertaining or exciting or deep division. Frankly, it's probably the worst division in the UFC right now. And so Kayla Harrison, my point is, Kayla Harrison is the UFC's best shot at making the women's bantamweight division great again, for lack of a better phrase. And so I'm kind of surprised that they didn't just go for the title fight with Kayla right away, because I think nobody would have argued it in terms of deserving it or not deserving it. I think people would have been thrilled to see Kayla get the shot so early into her UFC career. And frankly, we don't know how many bantamweight fights we're going to get out of Kayla Harrison. She, of course, used to fight at both 145 and 155 in PFL. She's a big woman. She had to cut a lot of weight and a lot of muscle to get down to 135. It was not an easy process. I think she would tell you that. She ultimately is a pro and she made the weight. But as you get older, generally the weight cutting does get tougher. And the older that Kayla gets, the tougher it's going to be for her to get down to 135. And so I think we kind of have to appreciate every bantamweight fight we get out of Kayla. I think the UFC has to appreciate that, because it's not going to last forever. And so in some ways, this is a missed opportunity. Ultimately, I don't know if it's going to matter, because I think Caitlin Vieira is in for a tough night at the office on Saturday. Kayla Harrison is just a monster on the ground. She's getting better on the feet, but it's on the ground where she does her best work, of course. Judo champion in the Olympics and all the credentials you need. And it'll be interesting to see how she performs. And excuse me, I'm also interested to see if maybe they bring her into the cage to face off with either Pennington or Pena. The UFC doesn't really do that too often, but I think this would be a great opportunity for that, because, again, Kayla Harrison, if she wins, which I think she will, she has to be next. There's no other really option, frankly. And so that's super interesting as well. Jose Aldo, of course, on the card. A lot of people thought his last fight against, who did he fight? Not Chris Gutierrez. Who did Jose Aldo last fight? Who did Jose Aldo last fight? It was, of course, Jonathan Martinez. How could I forget? UFC 301 in May. A lot of people thought that was going to be Aldo's last fight. That was his last fight on his contract. There was kind of speculation that he was really just coming back to the UFC, left unretired to finish his UFC contract and then go pursue other opportunities, whether it's boxing, maybe not Jake Paul per se, but on a Jake Paul card. Patricio Pitbull Freire, the Bellator champion, had expressed interest in a fight with Aldo. A lot of opportunities outside the UFC. And I think people expected Aldo to have this fight with Martinez and go about his life, do what he wants. But he is back, and he is fighting Mario Bautista, another tough up-and-comer in this division. Bautista is coming off, he's won 6 in a row. He's done really well for himself for the past few years. But this is, by and large, his toughest test to date. He has never fought someone like Jose Aldo. I think his toughest fight before this was Corey Sandhagen, but that was back in 2019, before Sandhagen was who he is today. And so it's a close fight, but I think Aldo is probably going to win. I think Aldo, Aldo, even at his age, he's 38, but he still is one of the best 15 bantamweights in the UFC. He showed that in his last fight. I mean, a lot of people thought Jonathan Martinez was just going to be too much for him. He's really skilled on the feet, and people thought, okay, Aldo coming out of retirement, 2 years away from the cage, 2 years older, he's not going to look as good as he did before, but he did. Father Time just has not really caught up to Jose Aldo yet, or if it has, it's taken him from, he was up here and now he's maybe down there. So he's still as I said, one of the 15 best bantamweights in the world. And I'm curious to see where he goes from here. Win or lose, is it still the UFC for Jose Aldo, or does he have a plan? There hasn't really been a whole lot of talk about that, but I'm just curious to see where he goes. And does he have certain fights maybe up his sleeve that he's interested in outside the UFC? Or at this point, is he just committing to being a UFC fighter again, and does he want to make another title run? You'll remember he fought the current champion Rob Dvalishvili back in 2022. That did not go his way, but in hindsight, didn't look so bad considering Rob is now the champion. But that is pretty much it for UFC 307. Of course, there's other fights we can talk about. Wonderboy and Buckley, Dolidze and Holland, Marina Rodriguez is on the card. But those are kind of the main fights. Those are the main storylines. And a lot to like on this card. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a fun fight, fun night of fights. And as I said off the top, I think regardless of how the first, 14 or first 13 fights go, I think we're going to get some kind of vicious finish and impressive performance in the main event. So I think it's going to be a fun ending nonetheless. All right, well, we've hit pretty much 38 minutes. We've already gone longer than I thought I would. So I think we may as well wrap things up. That's UFC Paris. That's UFC 307. I appreciate you guys coming on here, checking this out. As I said at the beginning, I don't know if this is going to be a regular thing. I just happen to not have a lot going on a Sunday afternoon and figured why not hop on here and talk some fights and kind of throw it back to old times, if you will, not to make myself sound like an old man when I am clearly not. But I like doing this. I like talking fights and sharing my thoughts. And I figured, you know what? 6 days out from a pay-per-view, one day post UFC Paris, pretty good opportunity to hop on here and talk some fights. So I appreciate you guys tuning in and watching this. Let me know if you do want to see this more often. I'm definitely open to it. Drop a message in the comments or hit me up on Twitter at Nick Baldwin MMA with any feedback or any questions or comments or trolls or anything you may want to say. I appreciate it. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel. I really would appreciate that. And enjoy the rest of your weekend. I appreciate you guys, and we'll